What an exciting time it is right now in Birdland. The Orioles are 31-16, have the second best record in baseball, and just came off a sweep on the road against the Blue Jays. With all the excitement, I know has fans looking forward, thinking, what's next for this team? How good can they be? And many other questions about the O's this season. So after the off day on Monday, I'm going to open up the mailbag today, answer questions about Adam Frazier, Jorge Mateo's future, what Kyle Stowers could be in the future for the O's, and much, much more coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Tuesday, May 23rd, 2023. And welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are opening up the Orioles Mailbag, the second in-season edition of the Locked On Orioles Mailbag. I will answer 8 of your Orioles Mailbag questions, all sent in by you, the listener. Now, remember, if you'd like to submit a question for a future mailbag, you can email us at lockedonorioles@gmail.com. You can tweet us at LockedOnOrioles or drop that comment right here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube page. After you like and subscribe, comment your mailbag question, and I'll answer it on a future episode. And if I didn't get to your mailbag question today, there will be future mailbags where I will address your question. But that's all coming up on today's episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So let's jump right into the mailbag here. I got 8 questions to get to. Got plenty of great questions from you, the Orioles fans, and you, the listeners. Thank you so much for sending in your questions, especially a thank you to the everydayers out there who sent in a question. We're going to start with a good question from Teddy, who sent this one in via email. And Teddy asks, how is Adam Frazier compared to Rougned Odor so far this season? This is something that's been talked about a lot in Birdland. This is actually something I talked about a lot when the Orioles signed Adam Frazier this offseason. Picked him up on a 1-year, $8 million deal, a veteran left-handed hitting second baseman, basically an easy fill-in for Rougned Odor, where the Orioles were able to sign him on, a major league minimum contract last year. And Odor wasn't really great. 470 plate appearances just about. He hit 207 last year. He did have 13 homers, but he had just an 80 WRC plus. He was worth just 0.4 Fangraphs WAR. He also had -9 defensive runs saved at second base. He was not good defensively. Generally, he was not really a productive player. You could say at best he was about league average for the Orioles last year. So it wouldn't have been really hard to upgrade what Rougned Odor gave you. And that's what the O's tried to do with Adam Frazier. They spent a little more money, got a guy with a little more, at least better recent track record. Odor's career, I would say, has been better than Frazier overall, but recently Frazier's been better. And I talked about how this isn't a huge upgrade, but in the offseason I said, Frazier's probably at least a slight upgrade over Rougned Odor. I would argue he's been more of a slight upgrade to this point. Now, we're coming off Frazier, probably his best series as an Oriole, where he had 6 hits, including a triple, a homer, 2 RBIs in that weekend sweep in Toronto. He was great, returning to the spot where he really played hero for the Mariners in the wild card series in Toronto last year. But Adam Frazier, 160 plate appearances in. He's played 46 of the Orioles' 47 games, hitting 250, 355 on base, 407 slugging. That's all better than Odor did last year. A 109 WRC plus, which means he's been 9% better than the league average hitter this year. He already has 5 home runs, which puts him on pace to eclipse Odor's 13. Frazier only hit 3 home runs all of last season with the Mariners. He's already got 5 in mid-May, already worth 0.6 Fangraphs WAR. Remember, Odor was 0.4 all of last year. He hasn't been as good defensively as he's generally been in his career, -2 defensive runs saved at second base, but he's still been better than Odor, and he's also played a solid outfield when he's had to go on to left field or right field for the Orioles as well. And the other thing, he's a completely different player, plate discipline-wise, than Odor is. Adam Frazier has a career-high walk rate of 10.6% this year. He came in knowing that every year Adam Frazier pretty much finishes in the top 10 in terms of lowest strikeout rate. He just doesn't strike out. Well, his 10.0% strikeout rate this year is still a career low. So he never strikes out anyway, but he's striking out even less this year. He's walking more. He's just becoming a much more productive hitter. Now you compare that to what Rougned Odor was through his first 160 plate appearances with the Orioles. He was an 88 WRC plus. He was a 219 hitter. Frazier has just been better at this point and throughout the season than Rougned Odor was last year. And it's really come down to what Frazier has done here in the month of May. He was playing solid defense, but he hit just 220 in April, and he really wasn't wowing anyone. Frazier so far in May has been fantastic. You could argue he's maybe been the Orioles' best hitter in the month of May. In 69 plate appearances in May so far for Adam Frazier, he's hitting 293. He's got a 388 on base, couple of homers, a 141 WRC plus, and he's striking out just 7% of the time, which is absurd. He's been great this month, a huge bat for the O's. That's why he's been hitting 5th or 6th in most lineups here in the month of May, because he's been so good. And I get that it's only been 47 games, but I will say, at least at this point, Frazier has been much better than Rougned Odor. Second question came from multiple different people. They kind of asked it different ways. Ian and Chase both asked a similar version of this question on Twitter, and then AJ also asked it on YouTube. And they asked basically, what is Jorge Mateo's future with the Orioles? Mostly asking about just this 2023 season in general. Now, this question would have gotten a completely different answer a month ago, because Jorge Mateo in April was looking like one of the best players in baseball. He was still playing elite defense. He was stealing an absurd amount of bases. He's still on pace to steal almost 50 bases this year, but he was also hitting 347. He had a 1062 OPS, a 187 WRC plus. He was almost twice as good as a league average hitter. His 15% strikeout rate was basically half of what it's been for most of his career. He looked like a completely changed player. Then came the month of May, and Mateo, quite frankly, has been horrendous in May. Whereas in April, he's been better than any other month in his career. Even though he's never really been a great hitter, he's been just an abhorrent hitter in May. Mateo is just 5 for 56 at the plate in the month of May. That is a 107 batting average. He has just one extra base hit. It's a double out of those 5 hits after having 6 home runs alone in April. He has a 30% strikeout rate. It's doubled since April, and he's only walked a couple of times. Here is the number that really stands out. He has a negative 35 WRC plus. Remember, 100 is league average. He's at negative 35. That's how terrible Mateo has been in May. And his defense has still been good, but actually his defensive metrics are down from last year, and he can still steal bases, but he's not getting on base at all. He's been on base 6 times in May. Doesn't matter if you can steal bases if you can't get to first in the first place. So his speed is kind of neutralized when he at least can't get on base at a solid clip. So overall on the season, he's hitting 242 with, a 93 WRC plus and a 0.8 WAR. But May has been so bad that I understand the question here. I think the Orioles, if this continues through May and into June, and we're already seeing him play a little less, right? Like Joey Ortiz getting some started shortstop and Gunnar Henderson playing some shortstop. But I really think what the marker is going to be for Jorge Mateo is when Ramon Urias comes back. Now, Urias hasn't been as good as he was last year before he came down with that leg injury, but Urias should be back at some point in June. When Ramon Urias returns, he's going to get good reps at third. He's going to get some reps at second as well. They're going to want to get Adam Frazier in there. And despite the struggles, Gunnar Henderson's coming along better in May. They're going to want to get him in there. When Urias comes back, we're really going to see what the Orioles think about Jorge Mateo. And if it's early to mid-May and Mateo is still struggling like this, and we're seeing Ortiz play and Henderson play, and then Urias comes back, I can really see the Orioles just demoting Mateo to a bench role where he's only playing against lefties. He's a defensive replacement. He pinch runs, but they sit his bat down for a bit because Joey Ortiz's defense, I would say, is just as good. Plus, he's 4 for 9 in his last 4 games. His bat's starting to heat up a little bit. He's getting more regular playing time. You've got Gunnar Henderson, who plays a great shortstop defensively. We know he's going to be in there every day. You're going to get Arias back. And then you have Adam Frazier, who I mentioned has been amazing at the plate in May. You're not going to want to take his bat out of the lineup. Terrin Vavra's heating up a little bit. He's more of an outfield option at this point, but he can play the infield. And then you got Jordan Westburg just kind of sitting there in AAA with, a 323 average and a 152 WRC plus and 12 home runs. He can play shortstop too, not as well as some of these other guys, but he's another infield option. Answering the question about what Mateo's future is, I think the Orioles will either try to trade him if he gets hot again this year, or he might just go into a bench role for a bit before the Orioles can fully sort out that infield. If he ends up producing somewhere between his April and May stats, he can stay the starting shortstop. But if he's closer to what he's doing in May, this team's a winning ball club. They're trying to get to the playoffs and beyond. He's not going to be starting if the production continues to look like this at the plate. We got 6 more mailbag questions to get to here on this episode, talking about the future for Kyle Stowers as well, talking about where the O's rank among the best teams in baseball this year, talk a little bit about Dylan Tate's impending return, and more coming up after this. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Sorare. Sorare is a revolutionary fantasy baseball game and marketplace, transforming fans into owners with officially licensed digital cards featuring players from all 30 MLB teams. But unlike other fantasy baseball platforms, Sorare managers truly own their fantasy experience. You're buying, selling, competing with player cards, and win or lose, you still own your cards, and there's no cost to play. And there's game weeks every week. And if you rank near the top of the leaderboard, you can win scarcity cards, game tickets, merchandise, signed jerseys, and VIP experiences like meeting MLB stars. So head to Sorare.com/lockedon. That's spelled SORARE.com to draft your team of free player cards, set your lineup, and start competing today to win epic rewards. Again, that's Sorare.com/lockedon to start playing today. So we're back here on a mailbag episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast after the O's had the day off on Monday before heading to Yankee Stadium on Tuesday. And if you would like to listen in on the game 1 of the series with Garrett Cole taking the mound for the Yankees at 7 p.m. Eastern time here on Tuesday night, you can catch every pitch of the Orioles hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Orioles. Back into the mailbag we go. Our third question of the day. 2 different people asked a similar question. Coleman asked it on YouTube, and then Dan on Twitter. Both kind of asked a very similar thing. Could a trade be next for Kyle Stowers before he ever really cements himself as an Orioles big leaguer? It's a good question right now because Stowers is back in AAA, and in the big leagues this year, it hasn't been good. He was solid at times last year when he first got called up. But Stowers, 2 for 30 with 12 strikeouts at the big league level. I get, he's had 33 plate appearances. That is a very, very small sample size. But for a team that's trying to win, when a guy's struggling that much, you just can't play him. And when he has options and you have better offensive options when your team's been hitting well, you kind of have to send him down because you need that roster spot. Now in AAA, he's been good. 95 plate appearances this year, 263 average, 5 homers, a 120 WRC plus. But it's not like he's absolutely lighting the world on fire in AAA right now, where he needs to come immediately back up to the big league team. Now, he still has some defense to work on, and, the swing and miss is clearly an issue for Kyle Stowers, but he was still a 3rd-round pick, and he was still a top 20 prospect, and I think the Orioles still think he can be a good big league player. I think other teams would think he could be a good big league player. And he is still great depth to have in AAA. Like if Austin Hayes gets hurt, or Santander gets hurt, Terrin Vavra gets hurt, Kyle Stowers is easily going to be that first guy who comes up to fill in the outfield on the major league roster. And it's nice to have a guy like that. He really gels with the team as well. Seems to be one of the most liked guys in the clubhouse too. But a trade could be coming while he still has value. I think the O's would like to see him hit better in AAA and maybe have a little success in the big leagues before they would trade him just to up the value. But when you think about, you have Terrin Vavra and Ryan McKenna both playing better in the big leagues right now. Mullins is on fire. Hayes has the best average on the team. Santander settling in May. There's not a lot of room in the outfield. You have Adam Frazier who can play a little outfield. He's heating up. And then I know Colton Cowser's on the injured list right now, but it's not a super serious injury. He's been great in AAA. And then you got Heston Kjerstad just dominating in AA. And those 2 guys are better prospects right now than Kyle Stowers is, or at least he was before he graduated from prospect eligibility. So Stowers is kind of at the point where I know he didn't get a great chance in the big leagues, but he still didn't take full advantage. And I do think he could be a piece. He wouldn't be like the main guy to go, but could be a piece that the Orioles would trade away to try and get some big league talent at the deadline. Next question comes from Alex on Twitter, who asks, on what date will the Orioles this year eclipse their 2018 win total? This question took me back a little bit, remembering once again that the Orioles literally went 47 and 115 in 2018. Finished, of course, with the worst record, allowed them to pick first the next year and select Adley Rutschman in the draft. But that was a team that started with Dylan Bundy, Kevin Gausman, Manny Machado, Jonathan Scope, Zach Britton, all on the team to start the year. And I know they dealt most of them away at the deadline, but they won 47 games. It is hard to only win 47 games. Generally, you say you're going to win 60 and lose 60, and it's about what you do in the middle. They only won 47. So the question is, when can the Orioles get to 47, or at least get to 48, I guess, to eclipse that total? So you look at the upcoming schedule for the Orioles. Right now, they are 31 and 16. Again, they have the second best record in baseball right now, only unfortunately behind the Rays, who sit in first in their own division. So I just wanted to go basically series by series and take a look at who all the Orioles are playing and kind of deduce from there, okay, when can they get to win number 48? So we start with the series this week. They're at Yankee Stadium. Yankees are playing really well. They're the hottest team in baseball right now. Let's just say the O's only get 1 out of 3. Gets them to 32 wins. 2 at home versus Tech, or 3 at home versus Texas. I say they get 2 of them. 3 at home versus Cleveland. I say they get 2 of those as well. That gets them to 36 wins. Then they go at San Francisco, at Milwaukee. Kind of a tough road trip. I don't believe in the Giants. I think the O's will get 2 there. I do think Milwaukee can be a tough team to beat. I say they only get 1 there on the road. That's 3 combined wins. That brings them to 39. Then they come home against the Kansas City Royals. Give me all 3 of those wins right now. The Royals stink. That's 42 wins. Then they're home for 3 against Toronto. Listen, the O's looked really good against Toronto this weekend. So give me 2 out of 3 against Toronto. That puts you at 44. Then they go on the road for 3 at the Cubs. I'll take 2 out of 3 in that series. That gets you to 46. Then there's 2 games at the Rays. That's June 20th and 21st. I say they split those 2 games. That gets them to 47. So I think they will do it on Friday, June 23rd. They open up a 3-game home series with the Seattle Mariners. The Orioles will be, I think, stuck on 47 wins right there. And the O's have just been so good in series openers that I think they take the opener on Friday, June 23rd against the Mariners, which gets them to 48 wins on the season. 48 wins. That is a pretty significant number of wins right there. For the O's, that series against Seattle, but they're looking for a lot more than 48 wins this year. Next question comes from Jake on Twitter, who asks, the Orioles are the blank best team in baseball at the moment. Blank meaning they are the 7th, the 8th, the 1st best team in baseball at the moment. I'm going to say the Orioles are the 4th best team in baseball right now. I still think the Braves are number 1. I know they don't have the number 1 record, but seeing that team up close when the O's went to Atlanta, that team is stacked. And I know they have some pitching injuries, which can be an issue, but they are just so good. Give me the Braves number 1 at 29 and 17. Then I'll take the Rays at number 2. Listen, they have pitching injuries too, but they're 34 and 14. They got the best record in baseball. I realize the O's have taken 2 out of 3 from them already, but they won the first, 13 games of the year. They've been amazing. I'll put them at number 2. I almost put the O's 3rd, but another team with pitching injuries, but is great elsewhere. I'm going to take the Dodgers at number 3. They had a slow start to the season, but their young guys are starting to play well. Max Muncy seems to homer every single at-bat. I mean, they got guys everywhere producing as usual. At 29 and 19, I'll take the Dodgers. But I'm going to say the Orioles are 4th. Again, the 4th best team in baseball at 31 and 16 with the 2nd best record. And then I would say the Astros are 5th. They had a slow start as well, but they got Altuve back. They're getting healthy. They're 27 and 19. They look really good. I'll say they're 5th, but I mean, maybe it's not the most objective look being an Orioles fan who covers this team every single day, but I'm going to say 4th right now. It's kind of crazy to say when you think about where the O's were just a couple of years ago. Three more questions to get to here on the mailbag. Coming up next, we will talk a little bit about Dylan Tate and who he could replace when he comes back into the Orioles bullpen, talk about the future of DL Hall this season, and then you'll get my thoughts on the Orioles official City Connect uniforms. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Game Time. Now, tickets to Orioles games or any game or any show you want to go to, it shouldn't stress you out. This is a time to have fun. This is your favorite event. Well, if you don't want to be stressed, go to Game Time. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the events, including sports, near you that you want to see. They've got killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantees. You can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for all the fun that you will have. And some of the best things they've got these flash deals at the last minute, but really what I love, the app is super easy to use for Game Time. They've got images of all the seat views. You can scroll down really easily and get the exact tickets that you want. And here's the thing, you don't have to plan months in advance. You can get the tickets the day of. They got exclusive deals for every sport, and the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find the tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So finishing up here on the Locked On Orioles mailbag after the O's had the day off on Monday. Got three more questions to get to. First comes from Command O's Forum on Twitter, who asks, when Dylan Tate is ready, who will he replace in the bullpen? Now, this is something we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks as Michael Givens and Dylan Tate, the Orioles' two veteran relievers who had been on the injured list for the entirety of the season so far, started working their way back. And we saw Michael Givens finally get activated on Sunday. The O's made the easy move there. He replaced Cole Irvin. Irvin was part of just a rotating, a revolving door, basically, of that eighth and final reliever in the bullpen. So the Givens move, that was the easy one. The Tate move is going to be a little harder. Now, Tate has already been delayed. He really should have been back already, and I'm still a little concerned about the injury. He had that awful appearance last Tuesday. He did pitch better over the weekend in his last rehab appearance for AAA Norfolk, inning in a third scoreless in that one. I'm still not convinced he's going to be back that soon. I am concerned still about Dylan Tate and his health with that forearm and elbow injury. But I would say right now the guy he's going to replace is Mike Baumann. Now, I know Bauman's stats still look pretty good. 25 innings, 3.96 ERA. He was great closing out the win over the Blue Jays on Sunday. 27% strikeout rate's been good, but his 13% walk rate's been a little concerning. The average for a major league reliever is just 8%, so he's pretty far up there. And here's really the difference for Baumann. I know his last outing was good, but he'd been hit around a bit before that. He had a 1.15 ERA in April. Baumann has an 8.68 ERA so far in May. He's just been a different pitcher in the month of May. And I still think even if they do send Baumann down, that he'll almost certainly be back with the O's at some point this year and will help them in the bullpen this season. But here's the thing. The other guys who have struggled some, mostly I would say Austin Voth and Cionel Perez in that category. You're not going to DFA Givens. He just came back. But Voth and Perez are out of options. You would have to DFA those guys. And Andy Koska had a good article in the Baltimore Banner on Monday about Cionel Perez, a little mechanical tweak that has allowed him to look closer and closer to his 2022 self over the last couple of weeks. Austin Voth has been better as of late, had a great outing in the win on Sunday. Their stuff for each of them is so good, and they still have a high ceiling, that the O's don't want to DFA them, because I guarantee both of them would be claimed almost immediately, and the O's would lose them. Meanwhile, Baumann, who struggled lately, does have a minor league option left, which means I think it will be Big Mike if and when Dylan Tate comes back, unless, of course, there's an injury to a different pitcher. Next question comes from Chirping Bird on Twitter, who asks, when will DL Hall get called up, and can he still be a starter for the Orioles this season? Now, we've seen a little bit of a dip in the DL Hall timeline over the last week or so. Hall had a couple of starts where he looked really good, was pitching deep into games, was coming up, 90 plus pitches. Then he had a weird start last Tuesday. He pitched just 3 innings. He gave up 2 runs, struck out 3, threw only 45 pitches. Everything looked fine. And then he just came out of the game after 3 innings. And people, including myself, freaked out a little bit. But the Orioles came out and said that was the plan all along. He was only going to pitch 3 innings. They called it a, quote, deloading process. I never really heard of a deloading process for a pitcher, but basically what the Orioles said was, because Hall had that back injury early in spring training, he got a very late start to spring training. That's why he didn't make the major league roster on opening day, because they wanted to build him up as a starter, and he didn't have time to because he missed so much time in spring training. What the O's have also said is that Hall's velocity is down. It just has been down. He hasn't been 97, 99. He's been more like 93, 94 DL Hall. And the Orioles and Hall have said that he just, because that back injury, was not able to be in the weight room that much this spring, which means he couldn't build back up his strength to where he wanted it, which means he couldn't build his velocity back to where he wanted it. Again, this is all from Hall and from the Orioles. So the plan apparently is for him to pitch some less innings moving forward over the next couple of weeks and be, I guess, strength training more to get that velocity back up to where they know it can be in the upper 90s. So that's where we are right now for Hall. In 7 starts in AAA, 30 innings, he's got a 3.56 ERA, 30% K rate, 11% walk rate. He could definitely still start for the O's this year, especially if they need a spot starter at some point. And I still think he could be a starter long-term, but my take right now is just put him in the bullpen. He showed he could do it well. He had success in the bullpen in September last year. The stuff is nasty. Once he's got the weight training program down and he's got the velocity back up, just put him in the bullpen. That one big league appearance we saw, I mean, he struck out 7 in 3 innings in relief against Detroit in that doubleheader. The stuff looked really good, even with the velo down on the fastball. Just put him in the bullpen, have him help the O's there. This is a winning team. He's one of their best 13 arms, which means on a winning team, he should be in the big leagues. I think and I hope that's what they're going to do. Last question of the day also comes from Command O's Forum on Twitter, who asks, what are your honest thoughts on the Orioles City Connect uniforms? Now, we officially got a look at the Orioles City Connect uniforms on Monday morning. They debuted them, had a video, had a whole big rollout for them, started selling them at the team store, and they're going to wear them on the field for the first time this Friday night at Camden Yards against the Texas Rangers. Now, we did get a leaked picture of them about a month ago. Turned out that picture was about 90% correct. It didn't show off kind of all of the designs, but it showed off most of it. And I know a lot of people were disappointed at, what those uniforms look like. They're all over Twitter if you haven't seen them yet, but mostly a black uniform, white Baltimore across the chest. And then the hat is really nice. I do like the hat, first of all. The cursive B is awesome. I'm probably going to buy a hat. That's probably going to be the only piece of City Connect apparel I buy, but I do really like the hat. I don't love that they didn't do a lot with color. It's basically black with the white across. I like that the lettering on the back, the last names are in orange. I like that look. But in general, little disappointed at times. Now I get what they were going for. And, they explained how the inside of the jersey has all the pop of color. And when you roll up the sleeves, or if you roll up your pants and show the socks, you get a lot of color as well. So I hope all the players do that. But the explanation was kind of, hey, it's about Baltimore, right? Like, people think it's just black and white on the outside, and that's what it mostly is. But on the inside, it's full of color, full of art. I understand the sentiment to go there. And I liked the, you can't clip these wings, that quote there that's on the jersey. I like that. I think they look a little better than we thought they would look when we saw that kind of leaked photo. So that's been nice. Again, the color that is actually inside the jerseys, that's a great design. I love the hat. And I get they were going for the deeper message. And the Orioles said, Baltimore is a city of first. That's why we're the first to put our designs inside the uniforms. And I get that, but I kind of have 2 issues with it. Number one is their clothes, and especially the stuff they're selling besides the jerseys doesn't have any of the color on it. So clothes are supposed to be worn to see what's on the outside. You're not buying a t-shirt because you like what it looks like on the inside. You're liking what it looks like when other people see it. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, it felt a little too John Angelos and a little too odd to just kind of lean in to the negative talking points that people who don't live in this city say about Baltimore, that, it's got nothing. It is just all doom and gloom when you look at it. And I get the sentiment, right? Like, hey, we have so much more going on the inside when you get to know Baltimore. That's what the jerseys show. But with the whole black and white on the outside, the color on the inside, you're almost saying, yeah, you're right. We are just black and white on the outside, and we, don't have much going on for us. It's not awful. It's just kind of odd. And I have a feeling the way the messaging went, that, as all things do with the Orioles and their weird PR team, John Angelos probably had his hands all over it. Generally, I think they're solid. I think they're better than we thought, and I like the hats, and I hope the color is showed off even more than we think it will be when the O's take the diamond on Friday night. But that'll do it for the mailbag. Thank you so much for getting your questions in. Again, continue to send in those questions via email, lockedonorioles@gmail.com, via Twitter @LockedOnOrioles, or in the YouTube comments right here to have them answered on a future mailbag episode. Orioles back in action tonight. O's and Yankees at Yankee Stadium. O's lost 2 of 3 to the Yanks earlier this year in Baltimore. They head to the Bronx for the first time this season. 7:05 start, Kyle Bradish looking to build off his great last start, and he will go up against Garrett Cole. O's will face Cole for the first time this season. He's got a 2.01 ERA on the year. He's looking like a Cy Young favorite so far this season. 63 innings, 68 strikeouts for the Yankees' 32-year-old right-hander. O's will try to figure him out after he went 6 scoreless with 6 Ks in his last start against Toronto. And then I'll be back with you here tomorrow recapping Game 1 between the Orioles and the Yankees. And I might have some really good John Means news because Means will be pitching on a professional mound in extended spring training in Sarasota on Tuesday afternoon. Our guy, Eric Garfield, down there, of course, is going to have it all covered, and we'll talk about how Means did getting back on the mound on Tuesday when I return for tomorrow's episode. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.